Hello, today we are going to answer the question of whether a deceased person can inherit. Okay, and to help us better answer this question, we are going to look at the concept or the doctrine of succession or inheritance by representation, otherwise called succession per stirpes. Succession per stirpes, right? So this doctrine is engineered to protect bloodlines. Per stirpes by the root right? By the root. So succession by the root. Succession per stirpes. Alright. So in terms of this concept, where you have a beneficiary or a predeceasing the deceased, then we are saying that as descendants can step into his shoes or her shoes and inherit on their behalf, right? So a beneficiary or an heir who dies before the deceased can have their inheritance share inherited by their descendants, their children, on their behalf. So the inheritance that ordinarily would have been their share had they not predeceased the deceased person, then would vest in their children or in their descendants. I hope that is clear, right? So I have my mom who has her mother. If my mother dies before her mother, then the inheritance that my mom would have gotten from her mother, who's my grandmother, would devolve in her children, myself and my siblings, right? So that is inheritance or succession per stirpes, or succession by representation, right? So this means that the inheritance would then devolve, or that inheritance share that accrue to the predeceased heir would then devolve in their descendants. All right. So muswi ko ha moja boswa a tlhokahala pele ga muswi mo wa dithoto, then boswa jo e leng gore ne bo tshwanetse go neelwa moja boswa bo a go neelwa bana ba gagwe. Okay, so ha e le gore ke nna yana ke na le motsadi wa me yo e leng gore o na le motsadi wa gagwe Nkukhu, ha mme a tlhokahala pele ga ga Nkukhu, boswa jo ne nka tshwanetse gore a bo je mo go Nkukhu botsewa ke nna le batsala le my siblings and I, right? Being the descendants of the heir who predeceased the deceased. Alright. Janong, you can have the per stirpes term in your will to say, no, I bequeath my property to Samam's mama per stirpes. So that is to say, I bequeath my property to X and X, but in the event that X dies before me, that property will devolve among X descendants or X children. All right. So let's use this analogy. You have a grandfather who has 3 children, and he has, or his estate consists amongst others a sum of 900,000 pula, right? So one of the 3 children of this grandfather dies. So ideally, these kids were going to get 300 bucks each from this 900,000, right? So now that there is this other sibling who dies before the old man dies, what happens to their share of that inheritance? No. Succession by representation or succession per stirpes then kicks in to say, no, this share will then go to this deceased person's children. So they get to inherit representing their mother or representing that deceased beneficiary. Okay, so succession by representation or per stirpes e raya gore nnyaa o na le bangwe ba e leng gore ba tsaya boswa mo boemong ja gago. Ke mo boemong ja gago ka gore o tlhokagetse before dithoto di ka phatlalatswa, o tlhokagetse before monga dithoto a tlhokagala. Alright, jaanong go araba potso ile ya gore a motho yo o suleng o ka ja boswa? Ee, o ka boja, mme boswa ja teng mo bo ja jang? Bana ba gagwe kana kokomane tsa gagwe, their descendants, ke bone ba e leng gore ba ja boswa joo, ba amogela boswa joo mo boemong ja gagwe ka gore ene wa basi wa tlhokagetse. Right? Can a deceased person inherit? The answer is in the affirmative. They can inherit by virtue of this doctrine of succession per stepes or by representation. Their descendants, their children would inherit their share on their behalf. Alright. Jaanong dikgwang tse phela re di bona mo malapeng gongwe go teng nnyaa yo ga ka ke a ja boswa ka gore o tlhokagetse. No, it's erroneous. They can inherit, but their descendants would inherit on their behalf. Right? So that is succession per stepes or succession by representation. So we usually have these disputes where, especially when people die without a will, where they die intestate. Remember we said where people die intestate and there is no surviving spouse, the inheritance devolves amongst the children in equal portions or in equal shares, right? So what happens to their share? Their share goes to their descendants or their children. Succession by representation or succession per stepes. Alright, I hope we understand and we will better manage family disputes surrounding inheritance. Succession per stepes, succession by representation. Thank you.